Welcome to our series A3 Storyboards Tips and Tricks, Episode 2. In Episode 1, we reviewed the history of quality improvement storyboards dating back to the 1960s. We also provided some important tips regarding the general use of A3 storyboards. These included the need to be flexible with regard to the templates used, as well as the importance of having dialogue throughout the process. In this episode, we will review the first three sections of a typical A3 storyboard. We will use a problem-solving storyboard as a guide. However, as we mentioned in the first episode, the actual template used will depend on the nature of the story. We will review the heading, background, and current conditions sections in this episode. The heading of a storyboard includes the title of the story. The title should be a brief sentence at the very most. It is suggested to have a catchy title that captures the essence of the effort that will be the subject of the story. As we mentioned in Episode 1, one of the purposes of storyboards is to garner support of others in the organization for the effort. Support from people who will be involved in the effort at some point of the process, or people who at least must be supportive. A catchy title hooks a reader in, gets them interested and excited about the topic. This is important when trying to get people to support an effort. The author is the person taking the lead in the improvement effort. The author will be the one sharing it with others in the organization, having important discussions throughout the process, and receive coaching on the A3 process. If desired, the author can list the other members of the team of people working on the effort, if such a team exists. Lastly, the date of last revision is part of the heading. It is important to keep the storyboard up to date, particularly when sharing it with others. An out-of-date storyboard is of much less value. Next, we'll discuss the background section. It is here where a description of the story is provided. Is it a problem-solving story, a process improvement story, a story about the strategy of an organization? A paragraph usually is enough to do this. As we mentioned in Episode 1, the starting point of the effort will also dictate how the story flows. For example, sometimes a clear statement of the problem and/or goal is known from the outset of the effort. The storyboard should reflect that by including this information in the background. The background is also where the reason for the effort is provided, what we call the business case. Why does the author want to spend time and resources on the effort and want others in the organization to support him or her in the effort? The case must be made, which will require some data, perhaps about the impact of the existing problem or the potential impact of an improvement initiative. It certainly would help to make the case if the effort can be tied in with current higher level objectives of the organization. Making the business case is important for the author to confirm that he or she is working on something of importance, as well as to get others excited about and supportive of the effort. It is this feature of the background that represents a built-in deselection mechanism. On occasion, the author realizes through the initial discovery process that the data does not support following through on an effort. This is not a failure of the process, but rather the process working as it should. No need to work on an effort when the potential benefit is just not there. Often people new to improvement need help in making the business case or not making the business case. They often need help to identify data that will help determine whether or not to follow through and how to obtain that data. Lastly, the background should describe the time frame of the story. For example, if it is about a problem, how long has this problem existed? This is a commonly asked question of the reader of a storyboard. Providing some idea of the history of the storyboard provides important context. For example, if it is about a problem that just arose, it may be prudent to wait before continuing. See if it is a recurring problem. Perhaps it's just a one-off problem that has a special rather than a systemic or recurring cause or causes. Next, we'll discuss the current conditions section. Here, the author will include information and data that describes the current situation in detail. The key is that the author grasps what is really happening currently. Current process conditions are noted. Photos, flowcharts, charts displaying data describing process conditions, results of voice of the customer efforts, and the like are all included here. Very basically, the purpose of the current conditions section is to learn. I often say that the author will throw out a wide data net to deeply learn. Later, he or she can pare down the data included in the current conditions section. Whenever possible, the information describing current process conditions should be obtained through direct observation, and not just relying on historic information captured in data systems. When displaying the data on the storyboard, the author should clearly note the source of any data as well as the time frame that it represents. Questions relating to source and time frame will often arise when the author shares a storyboard. Now, a concern here is the availability of data. Often the lack of readily available data leads the author to take shortcuts. This must be avoided. Effective problem solvers and process improvers are not data lazy. Effort and patience is required as data is gathered. As was mentioned in episode 1, legibility of the information displayed on the storyboard must be maintained. Charts can be attached to the storyboard if they cannot be properly displayed. In such cases, the author should carry forward to the body of the A3 any key learnings from the charts. If the reader wants, he or she can look at the attached details. The result of the current conditions section is a firm understanding of a problem and/or a process. Therefore, specific problem statements can be developed, if not already known. Well-articulated problem statements are a necessary step to effectively solving them. As a well-known American inventor, Charles Kettering, stated, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." The ability to construct proper problem statements is a common gap in less experienced problem solvers. They often describe problems in very general terms. A proper problem statement is specific and measurable, consisting of a clear actual or is condition and a clear should be condition, as well as the impact of the gap between the two. Here is an example of an improper problem statement. Inventory is really off. This should be reworded to something more on the lines of finished goods inventory accuracy has averaged 75% for the past 4 months, down from a historic 95%, which has resulted in 10% late shipments. This is much more specific. Finished goods inventory. There are other types of inventory. The is condition is 75% accuracy. The should be condition is 95. So it is perfectly clear that the gap is 20 percentage points. And the impact is 10% late shipments. Most people would be quite excited about working on a problem that is creating that number of late shipments. At times, the information gathered during the current condition stage results in identifying multiple problems. This is one point of the process where an A3 may branch off into several other A3s, what we call baby A3s. Whether this is necessary will depend on how the author sees the effort going forward. If the various problems are substantial, are to be addressed concurrently, and require involving other people, then the creation of baby A3 should be considered. Otherwise, the author will be able to handle the multiple problems on the same A3. They can work on one problem at a time, coming back to the next problem once they get through the PDCA process for the first problem. Now, new authors usually need a lot of assistance throughout the current condition stage, particularly with data collection. What data will help grasp current conditions? How can it be gathered? How should it be displayed once it's gathered? What interpretations can be made of the data? These are skills that must be developed over time through practice. In the beginning, much coaching will be needed to help develop those skills. Guidance from more experienced practitioners really helps. Sharing the learning from the current condition stage is important, particularly with people who at some point will be involved in the effort. They will have a better understanding of the problem or process, which will come in handy when it is time for them to participate. They will have the same appreciation for the scope and scale, the seriousness of the undertaking as the author has. This too helps garner support. An important tip that I have learned is to have the author read the storyboard out loud when sharing it with others. Often authors will tell me to read it, and I always push back and ask them to, quote, tell me a story. As they do so and hear their words, their own words, they realize that the story doesn't flow well. They'll say things like, that didn't sound right. They often learn that they are confusing problems, causes, countermeasures, and goals. Such confusion can really trip up a problem solver or process improver. By reading it out loud, they can discover this on their own. Such self-reflection really helps the author become a better author. I encourage you to do the same. Lastly, it is important for the author to determine what current condition information is really important to telling the story. All the information that has been gathered is relevant, but some is more important than other. I often have to remind authors that it is not about overwhelming people with what the author has learned, but about telling a succinct, compelling story. This requires the author to prioritize the information in a way and decide what he or she will include in the storyboard and what he or she will not. This is part of the process and part of the reason of containing it to a very specific amount of real estate, the 11 by 17 inch piece of paper. It forces the author to make these decisions and priorities of information, particularly in the current conditions section. This brings episode 2 to a close. To review a few points, the storyboard must be kept up to date for it to remain effective as a thinking and communication device. Next, the author must share the storyboard in order to communicate it with others, as well as to receive guidance. The background section can result in deselecting a topic and prompt the author to select a different subject of greater importance. This is a great feature of A3 storyboards. It's not someone else telling the author they shouldn't work on something. They discover that themselves as early as the background section, before a lot of time and effort and emotion has been expended on a particular story. And last, the author must distinguish what information is truly important to the story from other information that may be relevant, but just not critical to telling the story. I hope that you found the information in this episode helpful. In the next episode, we will cover the goal, analysis, and countermeasure sections with additional tips provided for each. I hope that you will join us.